It was May the 11th, 1973, when Eric and Phyllis Dallison forced their way into the home of their daughter, Denise Anne Fairbairn. They hadn't seen her for 2 days and concerns were rising. They'd had breakfast with her at their home on the 9th of May before she took her children to school, but alarms were raised later that day when she failed to collect the youngest one. Then word came from Denise's employer that she hadn't shown up to work. 28-year-old Denise Fairbairn from Feltham, West London, was a popular woman by all accounts. In 1973, she was working as a hairdresser at a nearby salon in Bedfont. Denise and her 34-year-old husband, Brian, who was a self-employed builder, lived at Sparrow Farm Drive, which is 2 miles southeast of Heathrow Airport. They'd been married for 11 years and had 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys, who had recently, due to marital problems within the family home, been living with Denise's parents at nearby Southfield Close. Denise had recently told her mother that she was afraid of Brian after an argument ended in violence. Despite this revelation and in hope of patching things up, Denise, Brian and the children spent a few days at Denise's parents' house beginning on Friday the 4th of May. By Wednesday the 9th, Denise and Brian's relationship seemed to have improved, so they left together that morning. But it was agreed that the children would remain at Denise's parents' home until Denise and Brian had completely resolved their marital issues. That same day, Denise's mother gave her some money and a shopping list and asked her if she would do some shopping for her. She agreed, and they planned to meet up again that evening. But when Denise didn't show up, it didn't take long for her mother and father to act. When Eric Dallison went to his daughter's home on Sparrow Farm Drive, he found the house locked, with no sign of Denise or Brian. 2 days later, Eric and Phyllis entered the house together through the back window. They noticed their daughter's house keys on a side table along with the shopping she had promised her mother. And oddly, a pair of Denise's high-heeled shoes lay next to the deep freezer. On seeing the shoes, Mrs. Dallison said she can't be far away. To conserve energy, Eric planned to turn the electricity supply off and take with him what little food there was in the freezer. He opened the freezer door and moved a few food items. The sudden shock of what he saw made him slam the freezer door, turn and shout stop to his wife who was approaching. But it was too late. Phyllis had seen it too. Buried beneath a few food containers, in a sitting position, was the frozen body of Denise. On checking the garage, they found that Denise and Brian's car, a blue Hillman Avenger, was not there. Police were called to the scene, and Eric and Phyllis were left with the painful task of telling their grandchildren, 11-year-old Tony, 9-year-old Darren, 8-year-old Trina and 7-year-old Donna, about the death of their mother. Detective Declan Hurley of Staines CID headed the investigation. Police went door to door to try to find out more about the movements of Denise and Brian Fairbairn in the last few days. Denise's daughter's head mistress said that she had noticed marks on Denise's neck and that recently she'd had a tired, dishevelled appearance. A neighbour named Rita Rand, who lived 3 doors down from the Fairbairn house, said, "I knew her very well. She used to do neighbours' hair at their homes in her spare time. Her children meant everything to her. They were always clean and smartly dressed." Another neighbour, who wished to remain anonymous, said that she was aware of the problem Denise was having with her husband and that she had looked unhappy for a while. Mrs. Doris Stanton, who lived directly next door to Denise, said that she had seen her on the morning of Wednesday the 9th of May speaking to an electrician at the front door. Police were sure that this was the day Denise Fairbairn died. When police went to Denise's place of work, a hair salon on Staines Road, they discovered that she had shared information about a violent attack with one of her customers. Mrs. Joan Mills said, "She told me when I had my hair done last Friday that someone had tried to strangle her recently. I heard she had marks on her throat." Now, Denise either didn't want to tell Joan Mills who the attacker was, or asked her not to share the information, or maybe Mrs. Mills kept that information back because she was afraid of retribution from the attacker. Considering the marital problems which had recently escalated to violence, Brian Fairbairn was a natural suspect. While the door-to-door investigation was underway, so too was the hunt for the missing car, and it didn't take long. In the early hours of Saturday, May the 12th, police officers found the missing blue Hillman Avenger, registration RLA 445L. It was parked in Shroton Street, a side road not far from Edgware Road tube station. The car was empty. Forensic experts examined it but found nothing. At this stage, newspapers included a description of the now wanted Brian Fairbairn. He was described as 5 foot 8.5 inches tall with light brown hair. He also had 2 tattoos on the back of his right hand, a poor recreation of the Saint Stickman from the 1960s television show, and the name Val across 3 fingers. On May the 13th, police released an image of Brian from a previous arrest, and it featured heavily in the national press. After speaking to other tradesmen, police found out that Brian had said on more than one occasion that if the law is after you, the best place to hide is a holiday camp where you can easily go unnoticed. For a while, police investigated these kinds of campsites, but it brought no leads. Neither did a claimed sighting of a dishevelled-looking Brian by a neighbour. Local construction sites were watched to see if he would turn up asking for work. Betting shops and racecourses were also a stakeout location for the police, as Brian was known to gamble occasionally. It wasn't long before it turned into a nationwide search. On Thursday, May the 24th, an appeal appeared on the Midlands version of their Police 5 programme. Similar to Crime Watch, which would be launched in the 1980s, Police 5 asked for help from the public to solve crimes. London's version of Police 5 was aired the following day. This was followed by other regional airings of the programme. The possibility that Brian had left the country via nearby Heathrow Airport, or any airport, was written off early, because it was confidently claimed that he simply didn't have enough money to travel. This assumption proved to be a hindrance in the minds of the lawmen and women searching for him. Some newspapers claimed that Heathrow Airport was under surveillance, but nothing was said of the seaports. In fact, Brian Fairbairn was already across the English Channel by the time the alarm of Denise's death was raised. Within 4 days of London's Police 5 television appeal, Scotland Yard received a call all the way from Bilbao in northern Spain. Brian had been detained in a Spanish jail for failing to pay a taxi fare and a bar bill of 600 pesetas, which equated to around £4. It was revealed that Fairbairn had travelled to France on May the 10th, then hitchhiked his way to Spain, where he stayed in cheap boarding houses until he ran out of funds and attempted to steal. He was arrested on Sunday the 27th of May, 18 days after Denise's death. But it wasn't realised who Brian Fairbairn was until a man named Robert Willock was called in from the British consulate in Spain. Mr. Willock took a statement from him and found that he had no luggage, money or documents. On May the 30th, 1973, Detective Superintendent Declan Hurley flew out to Bilbao to conduct an interview with his suspect. During that interview, Brian confessed to killing Denise. A warrant for his arrest was issued, and extradition proceedings were sought through Interpol, but it would take some time to get Fairbairn back on British soil. An inquest was held in Hammersmith, London, in Brian Fairbairn's absence. It was the 20th of November 1973, more than 6 months after Denise had died. Brian had been arrested almost as long ago, but was behind bars in northern Spain, still awaiting his extradition. According to the press, it was a quiet courtroom when Brian's confession, which was recorded by Detective Hurley, was heard. Brian had told Hurley, "Another row started about other men, but I don't know who they were. I cannot understand what got into her, because in the last 9 months I've given her a small fortune of between £4,000 and £5,000 to spend. We were both shouting, the argument became violent, and the next thing I knew she was dead, just like that. I don't remember stabbing her, but if she had a stab wound, it must have been me. I only remember strangling her." Then he explained how he'd fled to Spain on a false passport, going from Dover to Calais to Paris, then hitchhiking to Bilbao. Prior to leaving, he picked up some clothing and between £60 and £70. Detective Hurley told coroner John Burton and pathologist Rufus Crompton that Fairbairn would be charged with his wife's murder on his return to England. The pathologist in the case, Rufus Crompton, said that apart from being stabbed in the back with a kitchen knife, there were clear abrasions on Denise's nose, right cheek, chin and neck. She had died from asphyxiation by choking on vomit, but there was no way of telling if she died before or after she was put into the freezer. It was mentioned in the press that a blood-stained knife was found, but it's unclear where the knife was. One would think that if it was at the murder scene, it would have been found by Denise's parents. It took 14 months, but on the 2nd of August 1974, Scotland Yard met with Brian Fairbairn in the Spanish town of San Sebastian, 13 miles from the French border, to escort him back to London. He was charged with murder and remanded in custody in Feltham. Brian Ernest Fairbairn went to trial on Friday the 12th of December 1974 at the historic Old Bailey. There, he told his version of events, but not before Denise's parents told theirs. Denise's mother, Phyllis Dallison, who calls Denise by her middle name, Anne, spoke about a conversation she'd had with her daughter on the 4th of May 1973 that confirmed Brian had attacked her before. She said, "She seemed scared and trembling. She didn't want to go back to their house because that's where he attacked her." Anne said that Brian had got hold of her by the throat, then she passed out and woke up on the bed. She was very frightened. Denise's mother also spoke about the new living arrangements they had. You may remember at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that due to the marital problems, the family had stayed with Denise's parents for a few days, from Friday the 4th of May until Wednesday the 9th, with the children remaining with their grandparents until things improved. Phyllis added, "On Wednesday morning, May the 9th, Anne took me to work in her car. I had given her a shopping list and some money. She said, 'See you tonight, Mum,' and that was the last time I saw her alive." At this point, Phyllis Dallison broke down and the court was adjourned long enough for her to compose herself. Denise's father, Eric, spoke of how he and his wife had found their daughter. He said, "I saw what appeared to be the frozen body of my daughter inside. I closed the door and instinctively cried out to stop my wife, but she had also caught a glimpse of what was inside." Before Brian Fairbairn took to the stand, it was told to the court by Detective Declan Hurley that Fairbairn had previous convictions of breaking into a factory, theft, possession of an offensive weapon, receiving stolen goods, and finally fraud, which was his last conviction in 1970. For that, he served a 3-year suspended sentence. Brian Fairbairn's defence, Mr. W.M.F. Hudson QC, made it clear to the court that he acknowledged Mr. Fairbairn had killed his wife. He said that the only issue for the jury was to decide if it was murder or manslaughter on the grounds of provocation. Fairbairn told the presiding judge, Mr. Justice Thesiger, that he and Denise had already arranged to separate while he paid off a debt to the bank. According to him, the arrangement between he and Denise is that he would stay at the family home at weekends and live separately during the week until the debt was settled. He said that after he killed Denise, he took the Hillman Avenger to Chowton Street, where he abandoned it and made his way to Dover Ferryport via Victoria train station. Elaborating on the events of the day Denise died, Fairbairn said that she came into the kitchen at around 1 p.m. He asked her if she could give him a lift back to work. She refused and suggested he do some housework instead. At some point during the argument that followed, she admitted to being unfaithful. He said he'd suspected as much because sometimes Denise stayed out late and, on occasion, he'd noticed what he believed to be love bites on her neck. According to Brian, she told him that she'd had plenty of men and would have plenty more. He called her a bitch and she spat in his face. He went on. The next thing I remember, we were both lying on the dining room floor. I realised she was dead by her eyes. I held her to me and was crying. I tried to wake her up by shaking her, but could not get a response. I don't know how long I was holding her, but after I realised what I had done, the next thing that came into my head were the children were coming from school. I couldn't let them see her lying here, so I looked around, and as I had nothing in the deep freezer, I lifted the top and put her in there. Judge Thesiger retorted, "Having killed the mother of your 4 children, you put the body in the deep freezer to be discovered by her unfortunate parents. Then you fled abroad under a false name. I think your wife was goaded into the provocation she gave you by your jealousy. One must regard your conduct after the killing as in contrast with a case where real remorse was shown after provocation into violence." Despite Judge Thesiger's apparent support for the murder charge, Brian Fairbairn was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the manslaughter of Denise Anne Fairbairn on the 18th of December 1974. It was ultimately decided that he had acted out of jealousy and provocation because of his wife's openness about her extramarital affairs. It should be said that this was solely based on what Fairbairn had claimed Denise told him. From what I've read, no one came forward to confirm that the affairs had actually taken place. A year later, in August of 1975, Brian appealed his sentence, but the appeal was dismissed, with a judge stating that the sentence was appropriate and in no way excessive. The 1970s saw the first influx of British criminals travelling to Spain to avoid the law in Britain. This trend was to go on well into the 1980s, especially when the Extradition Treaty between Britain and Spain, which was used to bring Brian Fairbairn back, lapsed in 1978. This meant that any criminals living in Spain could not be forced to come back to Britain to face charges. The criminals involved mainly converged on the south coast of mainland Spain, an area which would be later coined the Costa del Crime. Brian was caught because he was unable to pay a bar bill in Spain. It makes you wonder, if Brian Fairbairn had better means to live by, could he have evaded the law until the extradition treaty expired 5 years later? Would the long arm of Scotland Yard have caught up with him? Or would he, like so many other British criminals who were just finding their feet in Spain, been able to live there comfortably? No new extradition treaty was signed between Britain and Spain until 1985, and even then it was not retrospective, meaning it was not relevant to crimes committed in the past. I want to mention something I held back from the main video, simply because it caused too much confusion and I couldn't and still can't quite make sense of it. As mentioned, Denise's father paid a visit to his daughter's house on the evening of May the 9th. 2 days later, on the 11th, both Eric and Phyllis went there, gained entry through a window and found a set of keys, bags of shopping and a pair of high-heeled shoes before finding Denise herself in the freezer. What I didn't mention was that on May the 10th, Eric Dallison paid a second visit to the house, this time accompanied by a policeman. Newspapers claimed that they had gained access and found nothing unusual besides a live radio which they turned off. If Eric and his wife had found bags of shopping, a set of keys and a pair of shoes, why were they not seen by Eric in the copper the night before? It was clear from the witness statements that Denise had died on the 9th of May, so she obviously hadn't been active within the house after that. One could forgive Eric and the police officer for not rummaging through the freezer because I'm sure murder was still far from their minds at that stage. But I wonder how the other items were missed. Or maybe they weren't, and it was just a failure of the newspapers to report accurately. With stories like this that are not widely known, old newspapers, often tabloids, are my only sources of information. The other possibility is that Brian returned to the house, but that seems unlikely as he would have known it would soon be crawling with police. Newspapers in 1973, while reporting Denise's death, strangely brought up an old story from 4 years earlier. In 1969, Denise had been arrested for the mistreatment of a Doberman. Reports say that she only fed the dog named Jason 1 tin of food a day and kept him on a 2-foot-long chain for hours. She appeared before a magistrate's court and pleaded to the RSPCA, who had brought the case to court, that she meant the dog no harm and had no idea he needed more food. It was a strange addition to the story. Aside from further damaging her character and suggesting that she may have been financially struggling, the inclusion of this story had no relevance to her murder. Also, when it was first reported in 1969, it had started a hostile back and forth between Chappie, the dog food manufacturer in question, and the RSPCA, who claimed that the food had very little nutritional value. There was another strange addition to the story. After Brian was sentenced in court and taken to a holding cell, he told a psychiatrist that in an effort to combat his emotions over his wife's affairs, he had robbed banks and lived lavishly on the proceeds. This was a sudden claim and a surprise to the court. Stranger still, there was no word from the police to confirm that these robberies had taken place, or that they were hunting anyone in connection with recent bank robberies.